Okay, well, welcome to the first chapter of this class, which is titled What Economics is About. This chapter is really quite different from the other chapters in the book. For example, in chapter 2, it's really about introducing one idea, really hedging that one idea out, explaining it as much as possible, and then you really leave with some key insights. Chapter 1 is different from that. Chapter 1 is really just a barrage of terms and information. The goal here really is twofold. One, to try to help you understand what economics really is. Maybe some of you had a really good economics class already and you truly understand economics. But if you're like me, when I took Principles of Macroeconomics, the only economics class I'd had was in high school. I didn't really have a very good experience. My teacher didn't really understand economics very well. And I feel like when I graduated high school, I still didn't understand economics. I didn't even know what it really was. I understood it had to do with money and politics and government and things like that, but I didn't understand economics. So we're going to introduce economics because maybe the way you're thinking about it is different from the way economists think about economics. So that'll be the first part. And then the second primary idea is to explain some key ideas in economics. We have terminology in economics that is different from terminology in other disciplines. And as you get to the later chapters, you may get confused when you see these terms. So what the book does is it goes ahead and lays some of those terms out in the beginning. So let's hop right into it. And maybe the first thing we could do here is to define economics. Oftentimes people do have the misconception that economics is a study of money. It is certainly not a study of money. Money is just one aspect that we can analyze in economics, but economics ultimately is about trying to make people happier. So I'm going to give you actually a couple of different definitions here, and there really is no right or wrong definition in my eyes, but you need to think broad. When you're thinking economics, we're thinking broad. So economics is, let's start as broad as possible, the study of everything. That might sound grandiose or kind of silly, but economics studies truly everything, perhaps more than any other discipline, I would say. Other disciplines that are similar to this, maybe sociology. Sociology studies social interactions and how societies form, that sort of thing. Sociology can be applied to just about everything, right? If you're studying animals, you can study it from a sociological perspective. Psychology, perhaps, could be applied to just about everything. Economics as well. Just to give you an idea of that, my primary fields of study are in sports and in gambling. So I'm a sports economist, and I also do a lot of gambling research. The last paper I published was about daily fantasy sports, DraftKings, FanDuel, that sort of thing. And what I was trying to study is basically, can we show that there are people who are skillful playing fantasy sports and prove that they're able to be profitable? That's an economic issue because economics can study just about anything. Because economics is really a study of choices. And once you realize that economics is a study of choices, you realize it pretty much is a study of everything because choices ultimately are the building blocks of civilization. When you think back on how we got to where we are, you think about the choices that people make. If you're trying to decide whether or not to go to grad school, that's an economic choice. You're measuring all the pros and all the cons. There's really no other discipline that would study that with as much fervor as we would in economics. And let me give you one more definition, and this is the way the book goes about defining it. I believe the book defines economics as something along the lines of the science of scarcity. And scarcity is something we talk about in economics. It's a very general idea that basically means that people's wants, their desires are infinite, but resources are finite, right? So you've got infinite desires, but a finite amount of resources. So if you want to think about economics in the terms of money, if I've got $5 in my pocket, there's a lot of things I can choose to do with that. The scarcity being that I only have $5, and the fact that there's lots of things that I want. So I've got to make choices, right? I've got to decide what I'm going to do. But it's not all about money, right? This morning I went on a run. I wanted to get some exercise, and I was trying to decide, what to do. But my body only has the capacity to do so much exercise. So I had to choose, what do I want to do? Do I want to run? Do I want to swim? What do I want to do? That's an economic, something we'd study using economics, because it's about choices. It's about scarcity. It's about trying to do as much as we can with what we are given. Okay? Everything in life is scarce. There's nothing that is infinite. Even something like oxygen. Breathable oxygen is not infinite. If you're underwater, you'll realize that breathable oxygen is limited and can become very valuable. So economics is the study of people making choices because they are under the law of scarcity, right? So they got to make choices. Economics is broken down into two fields. So it's the science of scarcity in general, how people make choices, that sort of thing. But there are two fields of economics. And in no particular order here, one of those fields is microeconomics. And as you might imagine, if it's microeconomics, it studies things that are small. So microeconomics is the study of individuals, firms being businesses, organizations, things like that. So it might be, a firm could be Taco Bell, for example, or it could be the Humane Society, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be a profit-seeking organization. The study of individuals, firms, and industries is a good way to think about it. Okay? And, there are some matters that are more economic in nature than others. For example, the study of poetry is not real common as something we might see in economics, but lots of things that individuals do is studied by economics. So, for example, economists are often very interested in dating, in marriage, and the choices people make with that. So that'd be an individual decision process that would be studied by economics. So, for example, if I'm thinking, should I have another kid? Boy, that's really an economics issue, because there's a lot to think about, a lot of choices that need to be made, a lot of benefits, a lot of pros, and also a lot of cons to making that sort of decision. So microeconomics is basically everything from the individual up to an industry. So if we're studying the steel industry in the United States, that would probably fall under the realm of microeconomics, small scale things. Okay? And I say small scale, but the American steel industry is a big industry, but that would still fall in the realm of microeconomics. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, is generally considered to be the study of economy-wide phenomena. And what I mean by that is, in macroeconomics, we wouldn't try to think, should this person go to college or not, or think about one industry, but rather we think about the entire economy. So when you hear about things like, how is the U.S. stock market doing, that is a macroeconomic issue. We're thinking about all of the businesses in the United States simultaneously. Or a study on changes in the price level, right? Inflation, deflation. That's thinking about changes in the prices for the entire country. So that's macroeconomics, okay? So things like trade, tariffs when they affect the entire country, like we've been talking about recently in the news, we may put that into the realm of macroeconomics. Interestingly, microeconomics is actually a bigger field. Microeconomics, there's more to study. Microeconomics can study individuals, firms, industries, and if you think about it, there's lots of individuals out there making lots of choices, so there's a lot to study. Macroeconomics is more narrow because it just focuses on the entire economy, which kind of sounds like an oxymoron, but if you're just looking at the entire economy, there's not quite as much to study as there is when you're thinking about individuals. So the class we're in right now, Principles of Macroeconomics, is a narrow subject that focuses just on the entire economy. Okay? It's an important question, though. Studying macroeconomics to me is an important concept because if we're trying to make people as happy as possible, which is a goal of economics, we have to think about how do we want to organize our society? How do we want to set up government? How do we want to set up elections? How can we make people as wealthy as possible without having problems like pollution, without having problems like global warming? These are macroeconomic issues, and ultimately, it's an important question, right? You don't have to look far to think about the importance of macroeconomics. You know, if you compare, say, Mexico to the U.S. Or Mexico to Canada, U.S. and Canada are a lot better developed. People generally live longer. They tend to have less major problems in their lives because they tend to make more money. They tend to be more profitable. They tend to be more productive as individuals. There really is no reason for that. There's no reason why people in Mexico need to be poor or have more poverty. And ultimately, macroeconomics is asking questions like that. Why is the economy of Mexico so different from the economy of the U.S.? And for that matter, why is the economy of the U.S. so different from the economy of Norway, which is in some measures substantially wealthier than the United States? These are big questions because once you start thinking about economies, you realize you're talking about suffering, you're talking about people's happiness. So it makes it very important. Okay, so we are in macroeconomics thinking about the entire economy. Next thing I want to talk about here is, if you're following along in your book, rolling through this next section, which they call the key concepts in economics. By the way, I know my handwriting isn't very good. I've tried to get better. I just can't. So hopefully you can read what I'm writing up here on the board. So key concepts in economics. Just rolling through more ideas. This is sort of getting to that language part that I alluded to earlier. Explaining the language of economics so that you're familiar with it when we come back to it later. So one key concept is that everyone has to make choices. And very closely related to this very general idea that you all know, right? We all have to make choices, of course, that's obvious. But a very economically oriented term that relates to this is something called opportunity cost. Opportunity cost. I would hope that you've seen this term before in any economics class. This is really one of those ubiquitous terms in economics that should be taught within the first week of any course. Opportunity cost is basically what must be given up when something is done. What must be given up when something is done. I hope that's, I guess that's a decent way of putting it. There's a lot of different ways to define opportunity costs, and this is just one of them. So basically, let's say, for example, when I chose to go on a run this morning, I ran for about 40 minutes, I think. The opportunity cost is what I could have done instead. I had 40 minutes of time. I could have done something else with that time. I also exerted myself. My body's not really ready to do any more exercise today, so I gave up the chance to do any other exercise I would have done. So your opportunity cost is what you give up when you do something. Once you recognize that this is indeed a cost, you realize that every activity that we do in our lives is costly. Everything you do has its own implicit cost. Watching this video right now, you're giving up the ability to do something else. So that's the opportunity cost. It's what you could have done instead. Another way, an alternative definition of opportunity cost, is it is the highest valued alternative. It's the best thing you could have done instead. The highest valued alternative. So as you're watching this video right now, you might be thinking, if I wasn't watching this video, I'd be taking a nap. Well, then the opportunity cost of watching this video is the nap you could have enjoyed, right? You're choosing to do this instead of having a nap. This is going to be different for different people. If I wasn't here right now, I'd probably be at home cleaning my house. It needs to be cleaned. So my opportunity cost of teaching this right now is not cleaning my house. So I've got to weigh these decisions. I've got to make these choices. Opportunity cost is closely related to those decisions. Interestingly, the things that we do in life that really make us often gain the biggest benefits is those situations where what we're doing is much greater than our next best option. So for example, let's say I could get paid $1 million a year as a professional golfer, and then my next best option is to teach here at Georgia College. Well, in that case, being a golfer would have a relatively low opportunity cost because it's so much better than my next best option. So in economics, we think about opportunity costs a lot because ultimately opportunity cost, what you could have done instead, is really what you're thinking about when you're making a lot of your decisions.